Welcome to the Moffitt Method Podcast, where longtime strength and conditioning coach Tommy Moffitt explores everything from the art of coaching, improving performance, sports nutrition, and mental training. Now, welcome your host, Coach Tommy Moffitt.
Welcome to the Moffitt Method Podcast, and I am your host, Tommy Moffitt. If you're listening to the podcast for the first time, please make sure and hit the subscribe button and then share this thing with all your friends. For more information about the Moffitt Method Speed, Strength, and Conditioning Program, please visit our website, themoffittmethod.fit, or email us at info@themoffittmethod.fit. Our amazing guest today is Coach Emmanuel E.J. Hibbler. Coach Hibbler is the Assistant Director of Athletic Performance at the University of Tulsa. Coach Hibbler played wide receiver and graduated from Wheaton College, earned his master's degree from Northern Illinois, and interned here at LSU, where he worked with our football, volleyball, soccer, and baseball teams. He has additional stops at Western Carolina, Louisville, Michigan State, and for the last 3 years, he was at the University of Arkansas. Coach Hibbler is CSCS, CSCCA, and USA Weightlifting Certified, and is married to his beautiful wife, Tamara, who is a former student athletic trainer here at LSU. Good morning, EJ. How are we doing, buddy?
We're good, Coach. It's a pleasure to be here, man. I'm excited about it. Meant a lot for you to ask me to be on here with the history of guests that you've had on. So hopefully we can have a good discussion. I know we'll have a good discussion.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's going to be great.
To it a lot.
Yeah. So, with my podcast, there's no pressure, and people ask me all the time, so, Coach, why don't you dress up your studio? Why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? And some people call this the timeout room. It's been called everything. But it's not about, what my backdrop looks like or anything. It's about our conversation, and we're just talking strength and conditioning.
Yes, sir.
All right. So we're going to get right to it. Okay. So tell us your story and what led you to the field of strength and conditioning, and how did it all start?
Well, I'm going to start by saying I know when I talk about my story, I'm going to say how you were the first person that gave me, an internship. I obviously started with you at LSU, but you're also the first person to have me on a podcast. So a lot of firsts with you, man.
Wow. Okay.
It's pretty a lot of firsts with you. So a lot of good memories and a lot of good experiences obviously come from Coach Moffitt. But for me, I was born and raised St. Louis, Missouri. My parents were both athletes. My mom was actually a All-American in the heptathlon as a freshman.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, at SEMO. She ran at SEMO and was an All-American there. She only did like one, I forget, maybe 2 seasons and cut her career, but she was an All-American as a freshman. Wow. So like a lot of talent there. And then my dad was a multi-sport athlete. So sports has always been in my family. So for me, my first love was basketball. Watching Michael Jordan and everything else, like that was who's the GOAT. I enjoyed basketball more than anything. But again, my mom being a track athlete and my dad being involved, like track was big in our family too. And football didn't come into the picture until I was in about middle school. And thing was, like, I was bigger at that time, and by bigger, like really in like height and stuff like that, I was kind of bigger than a lot of the kids that I played with. So like I didn't even play the position I wanted. Like the closest position to receiver was a tight end. So I played tight end and defensive end. They called it a JFL back then, and I played there. But then in high school, 3-sport athlete up until my junior year. I ran track, I did football, and I did basketball, but I had to give up basketball to focus on football and also track, which helped prepare me for football as well. But obviously the speed work that was being done there. But I ran the hurdles and I did the high jump, and the high jump was my event. That was my main event. And just like everybody in high school, you run the 4x4, everyone runs.
Yeah.
So, needless to say, try to fast forward. A friend at church, as far as like college, like the way I got to Wheaton, I wasn't really getting recruited like that, because back then it's not like there was rivals and everything, but like most of it was just about exposure and from the recruiting standpoint. So obviously there was not a lot of exposure. I didn't have an offense that really threw the ball a lot and everything. So a friend at church knew that I could play, and kind of threw my name to the coaches at Wheaton. And long story short, they recruited me, and I committed there, and for a variety of reasons. But enjoyed my time at Wheaton. Grew a lot. It's a faith-based school, Christian school, so like grew in my faith fairly big. And you're not going to find a lot of stuff about me on there. I didn't have like any type of stellar career at all. Some could argue barely any career period. But
Yeah. But you
I
played.
think the lessons that the lessons and the people that I
Amen.
met there have led me to where I am now. And so they always knew like I could play and I was good, but just obviously different factors coming about that. So ironically, two people that were instrumental in me getting down to LSU to start the field were Mike Clark, who's now with the Detroit Lions. His son JJ, who's also a defensive coordinator at Austin Peay. He was at Texas A&M for a number of years, and I forget if he was with the Chiefs or if he was with the Bears at the time. But him and Crackthorpe, Steve Crackthorpe, who was out on LSU staff, I played with his son. So the Clarks and the Crackthorpes, we were classmates.
Hey, great people too. Both families are
fantastic,
phenomenal families. Yeah.
So Chris was on staff, I believe, maybe as a GA or a student worker or something like that. And you trained his son Brad, because he was a walk-on QB at the time. So like small world. And
his dad was our OC at one time.
Right.
He was actually the head coach at Tulsa at one time also.
At Tulsa and at Louisville.
Yeah.
The stops that I've made.
Oh,
so
wow.
That's
amazing.
It's crazy, right? So when I graduated, let me backtrack. I did an internship at TC Boost Sports Performance in Chicago. That's how I knew, like, coming up, I wanted to be in strength and conditioning.
Yeah.
But in D3, it's not what it was at LSU. Like I had no clue. Like really, a lot of our strength training was kind of an honor code almost. Like just make sure you do your work because it's going to show. And not, like most of the team did it, but we didn't have a strength coach. I didn't know what a strength coach was. Our overseer was our offensive coordinator. He didn't really care. So needless to say, I knew I enjoyed training and I enjoyed the process of like what your body went through and then to reap the benefits of training and to see the benefits from that. So I did an internship at TC Boost Sports Performance in Chicago, where I worked with the likes of Michael Drock, who's a big name in the sports performance world with his speed stuff, because he's a former Wheaton grad. So he played at Wheaton as well. He played the year before I got there, was a great cornerback. But he took us through our speed program. And so I got to watch him and intern under him as he let us do those things. And then Dan Rickaby, who's actually the men's basketball strength coach at Tulane, he worked at a couple high schools. Yeah, he worked at a couple high schools in the Chicago area, and I got to shadow him. And so I was like, I like this, but I went back home for a year, worked in the private sector. It wasn't what I thought it was. And I'll never forget it, Coach. It was the beginning of 2014, and this was where Crackthorpe and Coach Clark come into play. I was like, I kind of want to get back into that team setting and that environment. And back then, there's no social media. There was no like, if you were calling people, you were looking on the website to call, hopefully when there was office phones. And I remember sending actual letters, which, I didn't know if anybody got them, but I sent them to I think I sent it to Mizzou, maybe Texas. I know I sent them to you, but I don't even know if it was addressed to the right thing. So, but I called. I remember calling you, and by the grace of God, you picked up the phone, and we had maybe a 20, 30-minute conversation just talking. And it was fantastic. And you offered me an opportunity to
How
intern
about
with you
that?
in the summer. And I came down during spring break time just to kind of scope things out. And I mean, I walked in and my mind was
Yeah.
blown. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Like, I was a kid in the candy store, like, just green, about as green as you could be.
Yeah.
And I remember you telling me, go get your USAW just to help you get, because back then the CSCS and the CSECA weren't like the governing bodies necessarily, or the accepted um, certifications with the NCAA. So you was like, you could pretty much have anything as long as you were certified. So you said, get the USAW, and I did, and started that internship that summer. And had a head full of hair then, which I don't have now, but it was a lot smaller then. But I mean, that internship, I say it all the time, Coach, like that internship was easily probably like easily a top 3 moment of my life.
Yeah,
Like
thank you.
I was thugging. I was eating ramen noodles and
snack bars and protein
oh
shakes.
man, them muscle milk bricks that were served that just didn't do well for your digestive system. I mean, we definitely were taking advantage of all that, but it was. I mean, I met my wife there, who's and lifelong friends. I mean, it was Coach Nader actually set me up with a job there. Because I worked at Our Lady of the Lake as a EKG tech. I didn't know what I was doing.
We had a lot of guys that did EKGs.
Oh yeah, I did that, and those people were great too. Like they knew I wasn't there to be a tech. They were like, the struggle there. I didn't have a car. Remember, I rode a bike. I borrowed I borrowed a former high school teacher that happened to live in Baton Rouge at the time. He let me borrow his bike, and I lived close enough where I biked to work every single day.
Yeah. Did I ever have to work on your bike? Do I remember?
You might have once, like because of the chain, like you might have once, but it actually held up. Thankfully, it held up fine, like where there was no, and you were the bike guy. And like, so I know you were like,
I worked on some interns' bicycles. Yeah.
Oh yeah. And I think that one held up fairly well.
Good.
But I mean, I had, former interns really helped me out there, like let me borrow their cars to get to work. And Floyd, Floyd, my boy, helped me. He would let me borrow his car sometimes just to get to work. Cause I think I would only work twice a week. Cause there were days that were lighter, but I would try to work 20 hours just to get, a 20-hour work week. So, but did the internship with LSU, that following summer, I ended up at Western Carolina with Coach Evan Barr for a summer. That was, again, I like giving people their flowers. I like giving people their props because, it was instrumental for me at such a pivotal age. He invested in me arguably more than like anybody. Like what I learned at LSU and everything I picked up from being green, that summer there was like almost the same amount of like pouring into. Because it was really just me and him training football. I helped out with men's and women's basketball, and I was going to get volleyball. But crazy thing is that very first week I got there in May, I met Brad Ort, who was my boss at NIU in Northern Illinois. And I don't know what I said or what I did, but it made enough of an impression where that August he had a position open. And I left Western early and ended up at NIU, where I spent from October of 2014 to pretty much February of 2017. I had 5 sports and assisted with football. So, I mean, grind. Volleyball, men's, women's soccer, women's track and field, and women's cross country. So went through a lot and grew a lot there. And then I ended up, I got a football position at Louisville Football. And so I was at Louisville Football then at 2017 to 18. I got married in 2018. And this whole time, my wife was at Michigan State. And working up through the ranks, and she was at football at that time. And there was a position that became open, and I decided to take a leap of faith and make a family decision because we just got married. And I ended up working women's basketball and volleyball there in the summer of 18. And that went until 2020. Got to Arkansas under Coach Jamil Walker in 2020. So we did the distance thing again. But then in the summer of 21, an athletic training football position became open, and we got back together. And then was released from Arkansas, and now I'm at Tulsa, and I've been here since February. So I've been all over the place.
Yeah. And I've said this on the podcast a few times. Strength and conditioning is, and young strength and conditioning coaches are kind of like starving artists, and you have to move around. You have to do a lot, man. And it's a hell of a commitment until you get that break, and you never know when it's going to happen. I was blessed in my career beyond imagination, but for 6 years, I was a high school strength coach in New Orleans, and I'd never been out of the state of Tennessee, except I'd been to Alabama. We used to go to the Alabama Gulf Coast in the summertime to vacation. And then the only time that I'd ever been out of the state was to go on vacation to Michigan to see my cousins. Yeah, I had cousins that lived in Dearborn, Ann Arbor, and Livonia, Michigan. And so we would go there, and that was it, man. And I flew in college. We played out of state a couple of times, but, it was an out of state football game. So I'd never been anywhere really,
Right.
Especially alone. And when I got the job at John Curtis, I took a leap of faith.
Yeah.
I didn't have a job. I was working at GNC. I was working at a health club. I was a recreation director at a state park, and, and this was in 1987. I didn't have a job. I couldn't find a job. And the John Curtis job came open in 88, and I took a leap of faith. I knew one person in the city of New Orleans, and that was a former college teammate. And I got in my car. I had $135 in my pocket and took off. I put everything I owned in the back of a Nissan Sentra and took off to New Orleans. And
man, I totally get the putting all the money. Like I worked when I did the internship. I worked a second job with at the time I think it's Covidian Pharmaceuticals, putting kits together just to make more money, so that when I moved down there, I had a little bit of a buffer. And I think when I got down there, I just flat out paid like 3 months of rent just so that I like had a little bit of a buffer. Because again, I didn't know I would. I think you had said you would try to help get a job, but I just was like, I need to do everything I can to try to help myself out. So I get it that the leap of faith that's pretty much the field of strength and conditioning, because there are no certainties.
No. And Coach Nader was a big help. You gave Coach the shout out, and he was a big help to us. And and I'm sure I told you this in our conversation before you came, that if you can't do it financially, don't do it. Because I know the commitment that it takes. But we tried to get everyone a job, and a lot of internships, and we had a lot of interns that spent more than 20 hours a week in the weight room. They'd spend 40 or 60 hours in the weight room and starve to death and live on those old nasty candy bars. Yeah.
Bricks and RTDs, man.
Yeah. We had a bunch of people that lived on that, and bananas and grapes from and I don't know,
the little bags of nuts that
Jamie's little bags of her little trail mixes that she made.
Yeah.
And you would see the interns, they would, after a group, they would just stuff those.
The peanut butter and jelly mix that she had. I was like, man, you just pictured you had some bread with it. It just was like, I'm going to town today. Like,
yeah. So she took raisins and peanuts, and she called it peanut butter trail mix. She's with the Saints and the Pelicans now, and still she's the best, man. She is the best.
What's crazy, she was there at that time, and Lauren was there, who's now at the Titans. So like
Yeah.
Like the amount of people that were there at that time, like, in your assistants and all that, like, it's kind of crazy always
Yeah.
to think back.
Yeah. All right. So did we have the nut meal, the peanut butter nut meal machine while you were there, the peanut grinder?
No,
All right.
no.
So, the rule was fruits, nuts, and bagels. And so, you would have a dry trail mix and a dry bagel, and you couldn't put anything on it. So one day, Jamie and I are sitting there, talking about the trail mixes and all the nuts, because she would buy, these big sacks of peanuts, like 40-pound sacks of peanuts
Mhm.
at a time. And one day, because I worked at GNC when I was young, and we had these nut mills where we would grind peanuts and make fresh ground peanut butter behind the counter. And one day I said, Jamie, what if I buy a nut mill and we grind these raw peanuts that you purchase and made peanut butter? And she goes, well, that, isn't that against the rules? And I said, well, we're not buying peanut butter. We're taking nuts and we're grinding nuts up and we're making nut butter, not peanut butter. And she said, Jamie, she laughed and goes, well, let's try it. So I found a peanut meal or a nut meal that was cheap enough that I didn't have to go get approval to purchase it. And I just purchased it on our La Carte card.
Yeah.
Because I knew that if I went and asked for the money to buy a nut meal, they'd ask, why are you buying a nut meal? And they would have told me no. So, it's better to ask for forgiveness than it is for
The
permission. So I bought that nut meal, and it came in, and then we would take those peanuts. It had a big hopper, and we'd pour them in, and the guys would stand over there. We had these little cups, that you get for mustard and ketchup at the hamburger at Five Guys. And the guys would flip the switch and it would grind the peanuts and make peanut butter. And then the guys would put it on their bagels, or they would just like eat it raw, because when it came out, it was warm because it had just been ground up.
Right.
And we started putting on weight, so it worked. And compliance, they didn't like that. But you know what? It was one of those deals where it was such a well planned and executed purchase and all that they let me keep it, because I found a way to circumvent the rules.
Yeah.
And we were not buying peanut butter. We were grinding up peanuts in the weight room to make nut butter.
A way around the language.
Yeah. Found a way to make it work, man. So yeah, that's cool. That's super cool. Well, you touched on this, and you have a lot of experience at every level in strength and conditioning. And you've moved around a lot, and, you've been through that struggle. What are some of the attributes that you feel lead to being a successful coach and being able to handle the adversity and all the stuff?
Good question. I think that I'm gonna steal one from your book. You first have to have the ability to teach. You've always said, and you taught this in the famed Moffitt 101s, coaching is teaching and teaching is motivating, which leads to learning.
Yeah.
And so you have to be able to teach the kids, because at the end of the day, that's what we are. Like we are in the service industry where we're trying to make sure that we can teach not only these kids that we service, or the athletes that we service, but even our coworkers and the people around us. Like we're always in the mode of teaching someone something else so that you can continue to grow, and I've never met a coach that hasn't taught me, and it could be things not to do as much as things to do.
Right. Yeah.
And so, you learn from every situation, right? Authenticity is huge, because you have, I think, a lot of coaches, and we've talked about before, we're like, there's a lot of pride in this field. There's a lot of guys that walk around with ego in this field. And sometimes that's not a bad thing. Like you have to walk around, or you have to move as if you own the room and have a presence about you. I think that is important. But being authentic, because a lot of people can sniff out fake and disingenuous, actions and motives. And people that kind of do things with the end goal in mind versus out of the goodness of your heart, and the kids most of all. I kind of have a saying sometimes. I'm like, kids might be dumb, but they're not stupid.
Yeah.
Like they know when there's an end goal, or you're playing a game, and because at the end of the day they can play that game too.
Yeah.
But I think then it leads when like you said, adversity hits or hard times hit or things that go on in life hit, like you don't go to that person, so
Yeah.
a lot of the times with us, because they spend the most time with us, we're the ones that they come to because we're so authentic with them. We don't really care about, I don't care about your stats and in your athletic ability. I care about who you are outside of the weight room as much as I care about you in the weight room. But obviously you got to have a knowledge base. You got to know the scientific principles and practices in the field. Like, can't walk around doing 10 by 10 every week and German volume training to the max and blowing pecs and doing all that stuff. But so you have to have some form of knowledge. But I think lastly, and I just speak on this for myself, that I think is a strength is like your ability to adapt, because nothing ever goes exactly according to what you feel it should go. And I won't ever say ever, because maybe it does. I just know that there's a lot of times like the coaches and the professionals that have the ability to kind of roll with the punches and adapt to unforeseen things coming about usually end up putting not only the kids in the best spot, but you put yourself in the best spot when you go home, because, the last thing you want to do is just like, oh, well, you get hung up on something that didn't go exactly the way you thought it would go. And it's like, I mean, we can only control so much, control the controllables, right? So I think those things, no matter, what type of coach you are, what level of coach you are, or anything like, I think those things are good qualities to have.
Yeah. You have to manage chaos. College football and really all sports, it's not an exact science. We have the technology now to measure a lot of stuff, but when you throw in as many people into the mix as there are in college athletics, there's going to be chaos, and you have to be able to manage it, and you also have to make sure that you don't show it. You got to have a poker face. You got to walk around, like you said, you got to walk around the room a lot of times. And so Coach Stacy Searles, an old offensive line coach that we had, who's at Georgia now, said that a lot of times you got to fake it until you make it. And there's adversity and chaos all the time. And you just got to just keep pushing, keep plowing. And, our term was, you got to just plow right through it and come out the other side. And I know the month of June, the month of May. So, when I first started coaching, especially at LSU, and even before the month of May, man, you always had off. There were no camps, there were no clinics, there were no official visits. The vast majority of the kids were gone, and we would have a skeleton crew at LSU, and everybody took vacations.
Or got married.
Or got married. Yeah. Oh, you know what? All right. So let me back up here for a second. You know that you are the third strength coach that we had at LSU that found and met the love of their life and got married. So it was Brian Johnson, Paul Jackson, and you. So three. You married a student trainer. Brian Johnson married Angela, who was a strength and conditioning coach in the women's, or not women's, but the Olympic side of the weight room. Right. And Paul Jackson married Christina, who was working in the Olympic side. So we were, not only were we making memories, but we were making families, man.
Making families, man.
Yeah, that's so cool.
Ain't nothing like a woman from Louisiana, man.
That's right. Yeah.
No doubt.
Trust me, I married a woman from New Orleans, so I know all about that, man. They're different. They're built different down here.
Yeah, you're not lying about
Uh,
that, coach.
uh, but yeah, so it's a great profession, but there's a lot that goes on in managing all the different personalities and all the different belief systems
Mhm.
and stuff. And Bruce Lee said you have to be like water, and that's the way it is in coaching. And the people, and you are correct, the people that can't do that struggle mightily. That can't just block it out and just continue plowing through it, and hopefully that you come out the other side, um, and all is well. But I know
Right.
recruiting, the month of May and June now is,
Yeah,
uh,
man. The way that's changed the
yeah,
landscape of college, like athletics, period. I mean,
yeah,
in my opinion, that you're seeing probably the most burnout of a lot of people now because it's expanded as
yeah,
much as it has. But like you said, like we have to, in some form or fashion, we have to figure out. Um, we tell our kids sometimes, like, when you come to work out or you come and lift, you have an expectation of us as
hmm,
coaches. Like, if we under deliver you, y'all would
yeah,
be pissed about it because
yeah,
first off, half the time, some of y'all don't even want to be here.
yeah,
But like, you expect us to always deliver for you guys. And guess what? Like, we go through things at home. Like, we got
yeah,
money issues. We got family issues. I
yeah,
could have just argued with, my wife the other day. And guess what? I
yeah,
got to coach you the same way as if,
yeah,
I just won $1 million, which obviously
yeah.
I probably wouldn't be worth if I did that. But, it's just, you got to be
Yeah,
consistent in who you are when you show up. And that's
yeah,
hard to do, like, because life
yeah,
is real. So,
yeah. It's
yeah.
real, man. Football is life. It's a microcosm
Yep.
um, of what life is all about, and so is strength and conditioning.
Yeah.
All right. So, speaking to your experience you played D3, you've coached in the FCS, Group of Five, and twice, or no, more than that, 3, 4 times you've been at Power Five in Power Five athletic programs. Can you compare the different levels and what makes them unique? And is there anything that you think carries over regardless of the level of play? Can you talk on that?
Okay. So, like, to, I guess, compare the different levels in a sense. Well, I know for D3, I mean, and this is no shot at any other division, but like, you've worked with a couple coaches and talked to a couple that come from the
Yeah,
D3 realm.
yeah,
Like you got to know how to grind. Like, I
yeah,
haven't met a person that comes out of D3 that doesn't know like how to grind and work because you're not afforded the same luxuries that you get
yeah,
at higher divisions. And that's not to say like D2 is better than D3. Like, there's some really good programs that have a lot of good things. Like, your Mount Unions, Wheaton isn't terrible at all as far as that's concerned, but there's
yeah,
levels to it, right? There's no athletic scholarships. So literally you do have to work, you're
yeah,
there a lot on academic merit. So, but the difference is you'll find, like I said, resources is the main thing, gear, the
yeah,
facilities, the ability to, like GPS tracking and capabilities, probably quality and equipment sometimes,
yeah,
food and snacks. I won't say there's not a mess hall or anything, but I know like for me, like we all ate where the common student ate at.
yeah,
And you had a meal plan, but like we had to get our own snacks. I had to buy
yeah,
my own protein. Like
yeah,
I wasn't given that. Socks. Like, guys are talking about we got a hole in my sock. Like, you got to go to
yeah,
Sports Authority and go get another 6-pack because you
yeah,
ain't getting no socks from us. So,
no,
any type of gear and stuff that cleats, like it was a discount for cleats.
yeah,
It wasn't, my cleats broken. Can you give me another pair of 13? Like, no. So things of that nature, like weight room, we shared the weight room with the student body. It was at the
yeah,
student rec center. And
yeah,
we would have a designated time where I think the students knew football was coming in there. So
right,
if you would like a peaceful environment, you probably should get out. But yeah, we, things of that nature, like there's medical care in the staff. as well. Like, we might have 3 athletic trainers and 2 of them might be students.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it just, from that standpoint, again, I say resources in an encompassing term, but those are some, in comparison, obviously, with the different levels of things, but there's ways to get it done. Like there's still not an excuse to not produce results, right? It's not an excuse to, you've got to find what you have and what you can work with and still give the athlete the best that you can, and based on what you got, and, getting creative. Maybe it's at Western Carolina, we made PB&Js for the guys in the summer, and basically snack bags, because a lot of them had internships so that they could work and get money and do things. So we had to lift at super early times, but then send them off with basically a bag lunch. And that was before the rule of unlimited snacks and all that, or maybe it was right around the time when that rule was changing. I forget.
Yeah.
But the other thing, this is your second point, where it carries over regardless of level of play. Like the desire to win at every division is just as high. Like the team at LSU is wanting to win just as much as the team at Wheaton. Like that. That doesn't change. Competition breeds excellence, right? So your things, your intangibles, like discipline and work ethic and accountability and trust. Those things are preached everywhere. Like the level of play doesn't change the standards of what is required to try and get wins and to be a successful program. Again, I'm trying to go back. I went back in my LSU book to put a couple, Moffitisms in here a little bit, but how you've said, like, thoughts trigger actions, and actions trigger thoughts, you said actions trigger feelings, like feelings trigger actions. Sorry.
Yeah.
That's
no,
what you
that's
said.
no.
So, like,
yeah.
Yeah. And so like that to piggyback off that note, that thoughts trigger actions, that trigger habits, which becomes your character. So all those things, all those things are encompassing at every level, from pro to peewee. And granted, peewee obviously look different, but it just, you're teaching the same things, and it all carries over. So, yeah.
And you've kind of touched on this a couple of times, and this is the reason why we started this company. Because at D3, and now I was blessed, in 1982. In 1981, when I started at Tennessee Tech, we did not have a strength coach. We had a weight room, but you just went in there and worked out, and if you didn't work out, you didn't work out. Now, there was a little bit of an off-season program. They called it County Fair, but it was all running. But there was no organized lifting. But in 82, we got us a strength coach, Coach Jack Williamson. He played football at Kansas State. This is, when there were guys like Dave Remington at Nebraska, and, the Big 12, I think it was called then, or the Big 8. No, it's called the Big 8. They probably, as far as conferences go, they probably did as good a job as anyone in strength and conditioning back in the early 80s. So Jack played nose guard for Kansas State University. Our head coach came over. So we got us a strength coach. So I was fortunate to have that. But there are still schools, FCS schools, Division II, Division III, junior colleges that don't have strength and conditioning coaches. Right. And that's, again, why we started our company. And, so there's always going to be somebody like your offensive coordinator who supervised, who was in charge of the program, but, he's not qualified and even doesn't have time to write the programs. And so we write the programs, and then we deliver the programs, through Team Builder, and we have remote coaches are there at, at their call, anytime, 10 hours a day, 6 days a week. The school can call us, the coach, the point person, the supervisor, the sponsor, whatever you want to call it, can call us. And, that's what we do. And just trying to add more value to a strength and conditioning program that is financially strapped already. Right. But where there's a will, there is a way. And, I was taught actions trigger feelings, like feelings trigger actions when I was a kid. And the last part of that is positive feelings yield positive feelings yield positive results, and negative feelings yield negative results. And so you get out of life what you put into it. And if life gives you lemons, you make lemonade. You know, we talked about this earlier. We both been fired. And, you know, every coach at some point in their career is going to lose his job. You're going to get fired, and you can choose to be bitter and upset about it, or you can pull yourself up, peel yourself up off the ground, and continue moving forward. And that's what you have to do. And athletics teaches you that. Yep. And irregardless of what level you play at. And you're either motivated by that or you're paralyzed. Yep. You're motivated by failure or you're paralyzed by failure. And it's a choice. All right. So you've coached a lot of different sports, and, probably adding them up, you've probably coached, upwards to 10 or 11 different sports in your career, both men and women, which I think is valuable. Yeah. Take a couple of your favorite sports and talk about how your philosophies in strength and conditioning may compare or differ when planning and organizing for them. Can you?
I know it's been said on your podcast a couple of times, like there is no difference in training men and women, like from a philosophy standpoint. Like obviously there's things that you might, tailor towards as far as the women, because there's obviously, menstrual cycle and things you have to take into account from a woman's perspective, like, around the knee, like making sure that because they're more prevalent for ACL injuries and everything. But from a philosophy standpoint, they're really like for men and women, there's you can approach them the same. And I'll even go as so far to say, like, I think women prefer being coached harder than guys do.
In my experience.
Yeah. Like they will, like women will, like, whether this is accurate to say, I'm not sure, but like you can agree or disagree with me. Like I'd be curious what you think, but I've always said with men it's egos and with women it's emotions. Yeah. Usually when you deal with them. And so like, and it's knowing how to navigate. Now you could say they're interchangeable a little bit, but like, the approach to them honestly is really not that different. The language might be and especially as a man, like I probably will come down on one of my, receivers a little bit different than I would come at one of the liberos on the volleyball team, as far as intensity or not intensity, but just in language. Like there's certain things you can say and certain things that you can't, and being professional. But, whether it's West Side, whether it's tier, whether it's Olympic, whether it's VBT, like no matter how you do it, like teaching the movement should not change. The squat is a squat, and now there's different variations, but proper sprint mechanics are proper sprint mechanics, whether that's a woman or a man. That it doesn't change from a technique standpoint. Now you might have to take into account injury history. You might have to take into account body type, limb length, training age, the head coach, what they want as far as like, but those are things all come into play in the cycle. But no matter the sport, like, when I had NIU at back then, and I had my 5 teams, I mean, my women and men's soccer programs, they were very, very, very similar. Like I really didn't have a lot of, like I might have added a little bit of variation, my guys, I think and I could be wrong, I forget which one, but my guys, when they squatted, we went on kind of in a triphasic approach. And then with my girls, it was just strictly like, okay, a little bit of volume, or maybe it's vice versa. I think I did the triphasic approach with the girls, and I did a little bit more of like the volume with the guys because they were smaller. And so like, but I mean, what I wanted out of my squat, like, was the same with both of them. So how I taught them all to clean was the same clean progression. A lot of it that I've used from you and how you guys taught that. So no, like it philosophies in me like are more similar than they are different.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. I haven't coached a lot of women's sports, but because at John Curtis I did, and I had some. I had one athlete in particular that still to this day is one of the most athletic women I've ever coached, and she came to LSU on a basketball scholarship. Ended up playing volleyball here. She may have done the long jump once in her career, and broke the school record. And she probably did high jump once and broke the school record. And she did a national clean and jerk contest and finished number one. So back a long time ago, USA Weightlifting had a program. It was called the High School Clean and Jerk Contest. So it was built on the honor system, but you put as many people together in your program that you could to do clean and jerk, and it was a thing that USA Weightlifting used for talent, finding talent identification. And so she did her clean and jerk, and when I sent in the results, USA Weightlifting, she was the national champion in her weight class and clean and jerk, and USA Weightlifting contacted me and wanted her to come to the Olympic Training Center as their guest, because she was so powerful. So, yeah. And then when I was at Miami, the women's track team, they were coached by Amy Deem, and Amy is a great, legendary track and field coach. But the women on our track team at Miami were as tough as our football players. They went to the same high schools. They were from Central and Miami Lakes, and all the tough. They were just like our players. So Miami Northwestern, and we had Northwestern Bulls on the women's track team, and they would throw the sign up. So they weren't scared of hard work. And so, yeah, I agree with that. All right. So besides football, what's been your favorite sport to coach and why? Because I know football is probably your favorite, but is there another sport that you really enjoyed training and why?
Hopefully my former athletes don't come after me for it, because I back then, they always say, who's your favorite sport? So you get in trouble by answering this sometimes. But but I got to say, I'm very partial to volleyball. I've loved training the sport of volleyball. My brother played. So my brother played at NAIA level. He was an All-American and won a national championship when he was a freshman.
No kidding.
Yeah. And so
in volleyball, men's volleyball.
Yeah, in volleyball. And here's the thing, sidebar. He just is part of a little annoyance, because my brother is 6'4", 235 or something, 240. And I'm like, what are you doing, dude? You got knee pads, put some shoulder pads on. I just you get mad about it. But I mean, he was very talented and had a very successful career, did a very good job. But a little sidebar that, because he played, and I'm like, all them tools, man. But to me, it was synonymous with the football schedule, so it was very easy to map out. Pretty much, they were very identical. Volleyball, I think the national championship games around Christmas time. Yeah. But they would report to camp around the same time football would. So it was just easy for me coming up in the field too to train them, because I'd have to be there for football. So I'd have volleyball on the side. And it was volleyball was the one program, major credit to Ray Gooden at NIU. He allowed me to grow and pretty much do what I want to do. He's like, train them. I just want them trained hard. Yeah. I'm pretty much not going to get in your way. And I want you to go. And those girls at NIU, you end up developing, when I say, how we said, women's sports, I think it's very important that I think every coach should honestly have to have some form of training a women's sport at some point. It just makes you a better coach. And that team was the relationship we have, a couple of them are mothers now. And I'll every now and then just be like, hey, I'm it's so crazy to see you growing up, and all that. And in the relationships you build with that, it's very, very deep. And even at Michigan State, like they had the same mindset when it came to the room, and they had never done Olympic lifting. So that was fun to be able to do with them, so they could learn. Like they were just eager, and they knew the concept of work, and you could get on them, and it wasn't like they would react to it. You know what I mean? And so their mindset to training was, to me, similar to football, because a lot of the coaches wanted them to be that way too. They didn't want.
And it's a pure power sport. That's what I mean. If I could train another sport besides football, it would have been volleyball, because the demands of the sport fall within my love of strength and conditioning, and it's pure power, reactive abilities. So it's a great sport to watch and to train, because of the demands of the sport is pure power. For sure. I have a good friend whose daughter, she's going to be a sophomore in high school, and she's probably the number one or number two, depends on what recruiting thing you look at, but she's one of the top 3 recruits in the country. And so she was at the LSU beach camp this week, and I went over there to see them and watched her and the girls practice beach volleyball. And they started at 8 a.m, and they have indoor volleyball camp going on at the same time. So she started at, I think it was 8 or maybe 9 a.m. at the beach facility. And then she left, ate lunch, and then went to indoor camp and practiced. And then I showed up, and then they had a little break where she ate, and then she went back to beach at 5. So I showed up at like 7 o'clock, and they practiced nonstop from the time I got there until about 8:30 or 9 o'clock at night. And it is pure power, man. I mean, and on beach, with beach, there's just 2 of them out there, and it's boom, boom, boom. They're diving, they're jumping, and it's pure power. So that's what I like about volleyball. So I'm right there with you, man.
I'm with you. I will say, even though I've never trained the team, I will say, like, softball usually has a good workout. Like your softballs and baseballs usually train very, very hard as well. Like in total. And like, again, another bar with it, like sometimes like the training approach is honestly predicated on the coach. Like,
you better believe it.
Like if the coach believes in the room, then the kids are usually going to fall in. Like I haven't met a coach that was like, I want them in the room training, and the kids were the complete opposite. But I have met coaches and worked for coaches that weren't big in the room, and it just kind of set the tone where, like,
I know it starts at the top.
You had to like, you step across in this room, like, I don't care if you don't like it or not, like we're gonna get some good work in, so that's
and in my experience, the worst scenario is when the coach is wishy-washy.
Right.
That's the worst. I mean, if the coach doesn't support you at all and it's up to you, then you know what you got.
Right.
Best scenario is when the coach has got your back and is dialed into it. But then the worst thing is when it's up and down, and the players and the coaching and the staff, and nobody knows what's going on. That's the worst.
Right.
And then to second on the baseball and softball, that is another sport that is max velo and power and reactive abilities. Training an outfielder is as similar to training a wide receiver as you could get, minus some of the conditioning, work capacity component, because it's just explode, boom, and catch the ball. Shortstop, second, your middle infielders, and even your infield. You can even put the guys on the corner.
Right.
They stand there, and just like in volleyball, and they explode. and, have to catch it and react and throw. So
Yeah,
that's a lot like volleyball. So see, you said it without actually coming out and
for
saying
sure.
it.
For that
You
reason, like
like
you said,
the power sports, man. And because it's the sports, that's the part of training that I like. Max velo, change, acceleration, deceleration, and power, man. So those are my favorite sports.
I agree.
Going out and doing work capacity with a football team was the thing that I disliked the most out of my job. Watching them jump, doing plyos, acceleration, deceleration, watching guys stick their foot in the ground. That's the stuff I love. And, work capacity is the things that football players hate more than anything.
Yeah.
But you got to do it because the games are 4 hours long.
Absolutely. Right. You got to cover all bases, and not to put a pun in there, but you got to cover all those bases and make sure, like, we got to do some of these things. Like we tell the kids now, like, linemen don't like conditioning, but there is an element to their conditioning that you have to do. Now, do they need to run miles and stuff? No, that's not the demand of the sport, but we have to encompass this just as much as we need to put a bar on your back, and just as much as we got to have you explode from the ground and push through the ground and all of those things. So,
because some of those guys are going to run miles during the game.
Yep.
All right. So, of all the sports, which sport do you think offers the strength and conditioning coach the most challenges?
Track and field, hands down.
Oh, yeah.
Track and field, without a doubt. Like, it just, because it's the most technical.
Yeah.
It's the most technical of all those sports. And obviously there's technique with all the other sports, but I mean, there's like, it's precision with track and field. Like, it's almost like athletic ability doesn't win you anything in track and field. You can have athleticism, but it's like your technique will carry you a lot of the way. Obviously, you're being able to be powerful, or some people are, just are able to have max velocity a little bit faster than, another person. But like, your breaking technique could cost you in track and field. So it's the one sport that truly operates on an annual calendar from a periodization standpoint. Like, the coaches are, like you just said this, like, the coaches are actually, there's periods where they are bringing them down, and you got to be in sync in the weight room and with the rehab and with, a chiro and all. I mean, just, it's a total team approach for a certain athlete, in order for them to peak at whatever time that they want them to peak at. And so, and there's cycles and it's waves. So, it's more precision than grunt work. It's not like we're going to do more because more is better. Like, more could cost you a year.
Yeah. It can cost you an eighth of an inch.
Absolutely.
Or a thousandth of a second in track and field.
And that will lose you, and on the pro tip, that could lose you, money and awards and things of that nature. But because there's only so many,
my mind is my mind is spinning right now thinking about it, because I did, our men's and women's. Well, I didn't do women's, but the men's and women's track program at the University of Tennessee was huge, and I was in charge of all the men, all the events. And, training that team was a grind too, because the way it went for us, and we'll just take fall practice was a little easier because there wasn't nearly as much running. And then back then, the track coaches weren't allowed to do anything. So, a lot of it was on your own. But nowadays, your coaches are allowed to do so much more than what they used to be. But now, when indoor started, when you came back in January, the throwers came in first. I guess the throwers would probably come trickling in at around 1:30, and they came in groups. So you'd have the shot putters, and then you'd have the discus, and then you would have hammers, and then you'd have javelins, and then you would have your multi-event guys, the decathletes and the vaulters would come in. And I'm thinking back, and then you would get your short, your sprinters, the hurdlers and the 100-meter guys, 200-meter guys, and then the 400, 800, and then you would get the vertical and horizontal jumpers. Those guys would come in at, so they came in as groups, and then the last group for me, and it was always the hardest group. And I'm still friends with these guys, but it was the weasels, the distance guys. I called them weasels.
Yeah. And that's a whole different crew.
Hey, you talking about wanting to pound on somebody, man. Those guys.
No doubt.
Those guys were great. So a very good friend of mine, and I don't know if you've heard of S2 Cognition, but so Brandon Alley, one of the founders of S2 Cognition, a brilliant man. He was one of those weasels, man. Those distance guys would come in, and before me, they never trained. They would do some curls. Yeah, they would do some curls and stuff like that. But when I got there, we did, we did a needs analysis of all the different events, and the weasels, the distance guys, and they were a great group, man. I don't want to put too much pressure on them, or be too hard on them, but they were a great group. We had a blast, but they had a lot of overuse injuries, and those guys would get up, they'd run in the morning. You'd see them. I'd be pulling up the facility, it'd be dark, and a pack of these guys would come jogging by, and then they would run again in the afternoon. So a lot of overuse injuries. So we started a training program. So those guys would come in because they ran at 5 a.m. They didn't make it to me until like 5:30 in the afternoon. And I'd train football. Yeah. I'd train football all morning, and then I would take a lunch break. And when football went to meetings, then the track and field team would come in, and that's how I met Aaron Osmus, and I'm still tight with a lot of those guys, man. You talking about a blast, having a blast. You talking about a great team to train. That was a great team to train, but it was busy, man. Again, we started at 1:30 in the afternoon, and the Weasels came in at 5:30, and we didn't do a lot, but it was all injury prevention, focusing on the areas where they had issues. But it was a tough group, man. It was a tough group to wrangle, man. Whew.
Yeah.
We had a blast.
In track, like, last note on that, like, track, usually it's the coaches that, how we talk about how coaches really influence, like, track coaches are probably the most hands-on because, it all goes through them. So that's what makes it a little bit tough too, because you're just like, they're seeing it from the field standpoint and the running and what they're doing. And then, like, they want to make sure what you're doing in the room. And a lot of times, unless you are truly the track only strength coach and you're out there and you're seeing them practice and you're kind of in on the, like, quote unquote annual plan, like, you guys might be training in two different, have two different thoughts to the approach, or they might say, like, okay, I'm trying to peak them for, like, in the college where, let's say I want them to peak only twice this year. I want them to peak at Texas Relays, and then I want them to peak for when we head towards, because this kid's got a chance to go to nationals. So then you got to work a program around them, and it might be different from the other ones that might be more developmental. So eventually in track, you could be having like 4 different programs. For, that team in and of itself.
Yeah, we did. So even our throwers, so Bill Webb took over as the track coach my second year there. Coach Brown was there my first year. And my first year, I had very little say-so in anything. And then I can't say I had very little say-so. I had zero say-so in what we did. Zero. And then when Coach Webb took over, he gave me some leeway. And, that's so even within our throwers, we had a 3-day-a-week program.
Right.
We had a 4-day-a-week program, and we had a 5-day-a-week program, lifting, based on the events that you did. So all of the income freshmen trained 3 days a week, in addition to our javelin throwers and some of the discus throwers. And then the upperclassmen, now all the javelin throwers, they only train 3 days a week, year round. And then when you were an upperclassman, discus thrower, or shot putter or hammer thrower, you went to a 4-day-a-week program. And then when you were a national qualifier, like Aaron Osmus, Wes Boudreaux, and some of the other guys, then you, Scott Perkinson, so you went to a 5-day-a-week program. And and then the hurdlers and the sprinters were similar. The jumpers and the sprinters were similar. So yeah, it was a lot to balance, All right. So let me ask you this. So regardless of sport, regardless of the level of competition that you play, what are a couple of things that you think are necessary for every athlete to do to put a good product on the court, on the field, on the pitch, on the arena, whatever you want to call it? What are some things, regardless of, all the stuff that everyone should do?
We kind of hit on it a little earlier where we were talking, thoughts trigger actions, which trigger habits, which trigger, which builds character.
Yeah.
So, the character of who you are is in essence like necessary, but there's just a level of excellence you have to sustain to have a chance at being successful, because it's not guaranteed. I said to a lot of these guys, I'm like, you're not the only team training to beat somebody. Everybody is out there trying to beat the next opponent, because especially in the sport of football, you have the most limited opportunities. You get one shot. Yeah. It's not like you get a home and home in the same year, or, maybe you could lose one or two and it might not, especially in the sport of football, you got one opportunity. In college football, you got one chance to face that team, unless it's, postseason. But there's 12 guaranteed chances for you to play this sport, and you go through all this training, and so you can't afford, a day of not being excellent. Just like we as coaches can't afford to I'm not gonna give it my all this day. I can't afford that for you. I can't. If you're call yourself a quality coach, or a good coach, it would make you sick. You'd be like, you know what, if you were disengaged almost, you know what I mean? I can't.
I ain't got it today.
Right. Yeah. You can't use that language because we tell them not to. And I think a lot of times coaches have to follow the advice that we give to our players just as much. Yeah. And so the Aristotle quote, excellence is not a singular act, but a habit. You are what you repeatedly do. So if we're forming and we're repeatedly doing things that go against winning, then why are we doing what we're doing? You know what I mean? Right. And that's not to say that you're not going to struggle, or you're not going to have times that are tougher than others. And that's where we go back to that relational piece and, trying to figure things out together, because it takes a village. It takes a team to get to where you want to go. But you got to be you have got to be excellent and demand a level of excellence of yourself. And when someone says that it's not it, the willing to be coached, the willing to be told, that's not good enough. I expect more from you, but it's from a loving place. You know what I mean? Right. I think a lot of these kids, today's kids I won't say they're different, because I think sometimes they've been brought up that way because of us, but if you don't have a relationship with a kid that you can actually get on him, so he knows okay, there's a difference between the language and stuff that you I can put my arm around you just like I can put my foot in your butt, but it's all but both of them are in love. You know what I mean?
They know they know when you care, man. They know when you care,
and they can know that. And you might you were talking earlier, there's ego in there now. You're talking about a lot of especially in the sport of football, there's a lot of testosterone, and in college ball more specifically, in more of your developmental stages, there's going to be some friction sometimes, because guys don't like being told that they're not doing things the right way. Right. Ask our wives. We don't like being told what? Dang, what are you telling me that for? But but those things are necessary no matter what field, arena, even. And it's probably even harder in your individual sports, because it's you having to hold yourself and do that. It's not even a team that can bring you along. It's you. So the intangible stuff we talked about, your discipline, how disciplined are you? how accountable can you be? How consistent can you be? Your work ethic has to be high. Like, and it's a day in and day out demand that the older you are, like, and again, it's crazy. I'm trying to talk like I'm this old head, like I'm not, but like you can look back, like, but there's wisdom that comes with experience. And so like the same stuff that you try to tell your kids, like how many times were we told as kids, like, take it from me, man, you're going to want to learn this lesson, or you're like, and you think that you're the exception to the rule. There's not a lot of exceptions to rules. Like everybody's not LeBron James. Everybody's not Messi, everybody's not Serena. Like, you're not these elite level athletes that could be exceptions. But even with them, like they still have a work ethic, and that's excellence too. That is like, you guys think that you're the exception, and those guys think that they're not good enough. Like they work twice as hard as you and are 4 times as talented. Like, so it just, my former boss used to say, repetition builds instincts. So continue to do things out of repetition, and they eventually will become part of who you are, and you'll realize like when you're off. And so, those, no matter what arena you're in, weight room, your home life, the court, the field, whatever, like it just, those things translate, because that's why they're repeated all the time.
Yeah. And for a lot of people, for a lot of young people, professional athletes are so good at what they do, they make it look easy.
Right.
And you think that anybody can go out and do what these people do, but their actions, their reactions are habitual from hours upon hours upon hours of work on a particular skill that is so minute, that is so minute. They work on the little things until they become habitual. And then when they get into games, they make it look simple. So everyone thinks that they can go out and do what these people do. And it's the difference in the playing field is so great.
The thing that you've always said, like another Moffitism like that. I mean, it's echoed all the time. It's not supposed to be easy. Like the stuff we're asking you, like I'll never forget in the summer, and each week, like in trying to like observe, like you were getting on the guys week in and week out. And I remember you brought us all in together, and you were like, I'm going to be the bad guy. Like, you guys need to be around and uplift. You're talking to the assistant, but us too, like, you need to uplift, but like I'm going to get on them. And you're like, it's not, you just kept yelling, it's not supposed to be easy. Like, we're out here playing in the SEC. It ain't supposed to be easy. And I forget, it was during one part in July, and every week you had a focus of a team that week. Like every week, it was like, Florida week or whatever. And everyone that knows you hate Ole Miss, and so like Ole Miss week, it was like
that Ole Miss,
and like everybody that knows you, like, and but you turned a different intensity in the way that you kind of spoke to him. You were just like, again, like it just in feeding into those guys, like it was like a switch turn for them, like. The difficulty of what the summer was, like they had done something like pretty good, but you like you were feeding them like positivity, like, hey, this is what it's going to take, like to beat this and to go forward and everything else. And so like, we keep saying,
and it's easy when you're LSU, and I don't mean this ugly toward Ole Miss or anyone, but when you're LSU, sometimes you think those wins are easy.
Right.
Because you're LSU.
We are who we are.
Yeah. Because, you've beaten this team, 6 years in a row. You start to think that, we're just going to beat them because we're LSU. No. Those guys last year were different. And, there are certain teams that always play us well. In 2019, arguably one of the greatest college football teams of all time. All right. And you can say what you want, but you have to put us in the top 3.
I agree.
No matter what. we barely made it out of Oxford alive with a win. Barely made it out of there because they don't care who we are.
Right.
They don't care. And there are teams every year that we would play, in-state teams. It didn't matter. If we played Louisiana Tech, especially while Kurt Hester was there, when we played Louisiana Tech, they were coming after us. And it didn't matter. We got beat by Houston. We got beat by Troy. We got beat by all these teams that we were supposed to win. And it was because we overlooked them. You know, grown men and adults overlook certain opponents.
Right.
You know, people in charge, administrators, you know, we got them. What? Go tell them that, you know?
Yeah.
Oh man. So, philosophically, my belief systems haven't changed in a long time, and I think that's, that could be a good thing or a bad thing. I don't know. But there's a certain way that I always did things. But for someone like you, you've had a lot of different experiences and seen it done a lot of different ways. There's some things that you've seen in the weight room or out on the football field that you were like, wow, that's good stuff. And when I'm a head string coach or when I'm working with another team, I'm going to do that. Anything like that come to mind?
So I'll answer that two ways, like kind of all encompassing, I guess, in career, because I could go on and on about each unique stop, I guess. But onto that, and then I'll kind of tie like what couple of things that I've noticed here that were like, this is new, like, a phrase that I got from NIU from one of my former colleagues, Zach Cahill. He would say, improving your toolbox or expanding. You always want to be expanding your toolbox.
Yeah.
So like in the field, like, again, when I started with you, you were an Olympic based system and learning the Olympic lifts and we trained hard and everything. But then I went to Western and he was big on the tier system with like kind of a blend of West Side, and I'd never heard of that. So that's something that I put in my toolbox. And then Coach Ort kind of did like it wasn't a true like neural structural split per se. Like it was still total vibe, but in essence, it was like we did our cleans, our push presses, and things on Mondays and Thursdays, and then they would do squat and bench, or be on Tuesdays and Fridays. Like so in a sense it was, but back then I had no clue what that was called. I was just like, oh, well, just doing cleans on Monday. But so things of that nature. And again, Zach Cahill was definitely one that thought outside the box. He was one that like pointed me to like look at both ends of the spectrum. Like you got guys like Ripito, and then you got guys like Boyle, and there's all this stuff in between, and it all works. It's just how do you apply it and how do you use it. And so like I say all that just to say like every place that I've gone and even things that I've done myself. Because again, the thing that you've said, like you're your best guinea pig when you do certain things, like you try certain stuff out, like maybe it's VBT, and not having access to, like companies like Perch and stuff, but I mean, simple tendos, or at Michigan State, we had Kaiser air squats, and I was able to somehow try to incorporate those within the volleyball program as they were kind of learning cleans, but I could get some kind of power output and do some kind of metric where I could, do stuff with them. So it's utilizing the resources you have, while like obviously sticking to principles that are tried and true, but like you can try a multitude of different things to formulate like, okay, what do these kids need? What do these athletes need? And how can I, effectively progress it and periodize it so that the outcome becomes a better athlete on the field? Because I mean, if it yields to better numbers, absolutely great. Obviously, they're a better athlete in essence, but can I translate this onto the playing field so that they feel the effect crossover? Like you could feel stronger, but you get on the field and you feel just as bad of an athlete, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? You could be
Yeah.
slow, but you're now strong, or you could be, okay, I did good and, the mechanics of what I'm doing, but how did it translate over? So,
Right.
so
Yeah,
there's
there's
a
three.
multitude of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, there's 3 books, The Transfer of Training, that talk about that,
Yep.
in depth. They go in
Yeah.
depth of the transfer of training. So, yeah.
And then here at Tulsa, like 2 things that kind of really have stood out. So Jevin Bowman, one of my colleagues, he's really, really one of the ambassadors, but really big guy into Square One. I don't know if you've heard of that. I mean, it's insane stuff. Like when you look at it, a couple, even our coaches was kind of like, what is this voodoo? But it's applied function neurology through the Square One system, deals with like the vestibular system, the visual and the proprioceptive, like feedbacks. And in essence, it's like interviewing the nervous system to find perceived threats and the attempts to eliminate those threats for a human performance. So like he did a thing where, and I'm going to butcher it. So by no means, I'm giving the actual, I mean, like layman's definition explanation. He could definitely go into the in depth of it. But I know we had like a recruit come and he had them like try to reach down and touch their toes. And I think they got to like their ankles, like, like kids today, tight as all get out.
Yeah.
And he did a couple things where like he had the kid like try to fall back or try to close their eyes and do some. He would pinch his tragus to kind of reset. Had the kid do a test where he pushes down on his arm because the nervous system kind of will give like a feedback to if he shuts down, then it's a trigger of something that halts. Your nervous system will not work if there's a threat, a fear of a threat, and to try to save the body from injury and all that. So he would do stuff to like clear it, and then the kid reached down and he like put his hands on the floor.
Wow.
And it was nuts, but it was nothing physically. He technically like improved on the kid. He just eliminated a couple things and a couple, again, perceived threats.
Amazing.
To improve his performance of that. And there's a like plethora of different things that can happen. Like I know he helped my wife because my wife tore her ACL last April. And has had some complications and stuff with it and pain and things of that nature. And he did his magic or whatever. And walking down steps was tough for her. And I remember she started walking down steps. She's like, I kind of don't feel any pain. And you're just like, all right, like it's just trippy.
Yeah.
So that's one thing here I've tried to like pick up on a little bit. Like obviously there's certifications with it, and you just try to pick up on things in observation because he's one of the best at it. But another thing we do like on the field that I do like, and I never thought about this, and you can give me your thoughts on it. But so outside on one of our days, on our tempo days, we do cross fields. So we'll run across the field, and instead of turning to run forward, back to half gas or whatever, they'll run backwards. They'll do a backwards run. And the thought is to target the hamstrings in a similar way in like late swing mechanics. So like instead of running forward, because obviously if you do that running forward, that's where the strain happens. So, we do it in a way where they're doing a max, like it's timed, like you're running backwards so that they don't loaf it. But we get, on the front end, we can get some high speed distances. Like we use Titan as our GPS system here. So we can get, because guys got to go. Like if you don't go in the front end, the back end, you probably could be screwed. So we can get some high speed distance on the front end, but we can also get, a way where we're targeting a certain aspect of the hamstrings that you really aren't trying to target on the front side mechanics. So that's something in the gait cycle. So that's something I never had seen applied before, which I'm like it makes sense.
Yeah. And, when you're working on just general work capacity, it's good, I think, to vary the distances and the means, because you're only working on general work capacity. And the more that you can do different stuff, I think the better it is for the overall development of the human body, the organism. Sure. But I think it also breaks monotony. And that is something that I've looked a lot at since I've been out, because I've got like multitudes of time to sit. And in fact, there are certain people, I know that there are certain people that when their phone rings or they get a notification of a text, they look at their phone and go, oh God, it's coaching. Because, but that is something that I've given a lot of thought to break the monotony of training. And whether it's galloping or running backwards or circulinear runs and all of that type of stuff, I think if I were able to do it again, and in the consulting that I do, because I've traveled a lot and consulted with a lot of different people, that is something that I talk about. And you know what? As much as I believe in it now, some people are like me, like the old me, and they go, what's this cat talking about? Like I was. But yeah, so I like that. I really do, because it's the same thing, but it's different. And the more that you can do different for kids today, the better. And, and the NC2A, I guess, has kind of loosened the rules on this, but people are doing, I think they call it contact prep, or, it's.
I've seen a couple coaches do that.
Yeah. So some of it is far out. I see a lot of it and I'm like, whoa. But some of it is really good stuff. But, at one time, that's you weren't allowed to touch one.
Couldn't do that. Nope.
And so I don't know what the rules are now, because thank goodness for me, I don't have to sit through compliance meetings anymore. Those are those ones where you want to gouge your eyeballs out with a pencil. And I don't have to do that anymore. Don't do this. Don't do that. Don't do this. Don't do that. And then you have to sign a piece of paper that says, if you do that, you could get fired. So I don't have to do that anymore. But yeah, that's good stuff. So, all right. So I got two more questions. So, and two more questions. So if you could go back 10 years, like Marty McFly in Back to the Future, okay, if you get in the DeLorean, and what advice would you give to young EJ?
Keep your dreads. No, I'm kidding. That one's for my wife, because she missed. She's like, I missed you with the hair. But I think it's twofold. Because back then I was so green that everything was just kind of like new and fresh, and I was really eager back then. Not that I'm not eager now, but again, with age comes wisdom, hopefully. But back then, there's some things you just didn't know any better because you didn't have the experience, right? And you saw how, I guess, other careers have gone, and you can't help but compare. And that's a dangerous thing to do. Comparison is the thief of joy a lot of times. And I would tell myself, firstly, like, your journey is your journey, man. Like, don't compare yourself to anyone else. You can dream, you can aspire, you can, I remember like the internship, real story, which shows my naiveness. When I did the internship, I'm like, I could work here. Like, I'm like, there's probably going to be a spot or something. Like, I didn't realize, like, this thing's going to end, man. Like, you got to prepare for, like, getting out of here. And I'm over here, like, I'm staying, man. So much
career
stuff happened in Baton Rouge.
Career job.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, so much stuff happened in Baton Rouge. I'm like, man, I don't know if I'm gonna leave for a little bit. I could stay down here a little while, but I think, realizing then when you go through your journey, you see certain guys might take off, more than before you do. But your journey is your journey, and you got to go through your steps and focus on what you're doing and be where your feet are, and give your best. Because if you're just worried about, what's next, or not that you don't plan for that, but if you don't, if you keep trying to say like you're not where someone else should be, like, there's no telling, like,
Yeah.
of, relationships and who you know and everything. Like it works out how it's supposed to, because we don't live with a vengeful, well, those that believe in Christ, like we don't live
Yeah.
with a vengeful God that, punishes you for, you made the wrong choice. Like, no, you made a
Right.
decision. Now this is where we're going with that decision, and you keep
Mm-hmm.
moving. And I think secondly is grow through what you go through.
Yeah.
That I've always used that. I'm getting on my preacher point real quick, but like my life verse is James 1-2, James chapter 1-2-5, which says, "Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, when you face trials of various kinds, because the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work, so that you may be complete and mature, lacking nothing. And if any of you lacks
Strong.
wisdom, you should ask God, who generously to all without finding fault will be given to you." So like I've used that because there's been, obviously, like everyone, like you have your moments where it's like,
Yeah.
what am I doing? Like, and
Yeah.
in the struggle of the field where you're like, man, can I keep doing this? Like, what, why am I in this situation? And or you're in a bad situation. Maybe you have bad coworkers, and
Yeah.
I'm not trying to call it no coworkers, but you're in a
Right.
bad spot, or
Yeah.
it's just tough. Like, it's still a growing moment. Like
Yeah.
you experience lows so that when highs happen, like it becomes that much more sweet, and you really thoroughly enjoy that. But it never lasts up here all the time, and it never lasts down here. So you have to learn how to, like we've been saying, ride your wave and growing through those moments. Um, and so like I would have told myself, definitely, like, just roll with the punches. You will be okay. You know, have a few good people in your corner, because you can't do it alone. Like friends and family are important. Like a good circle, a good community is important, and I've been fortunate enough to have that in my life. So
Yeah.
um, yeah, like
You know,
you won't be eating ramen noodles
yeah.
every meal and riding a
Yeah.
bike. You'll get a car. You'll
Yeah.
get a car eventually.
When I started at the University of Tennessee, and I didn't grow up as a Tennessee Vol fan. I grew up in Middle Tennessee, but there wasn't, Bear Bryant, it was at Alabama then, and Alabama was closer to me than what Knoxville was. And so there still is a pocket of Alabama fans in my hometown, but I wasn't really. I was a high school I was a wrestling, fan. So college football, I wasn't a big college football fan. I was a Pittsburgh Steeler fan, a Miami Dolphin fan, and a Lehigh University wrestling fan. That was my, that's where my fandom lied. But when I took the job at Tennessee, that was huge. And like you, I was like, man, I could stay here my whole life. This place has got everything I need. And that was my goal. And I was sitting in the cafeteria. I'd been there like a week. And I was sitting in the cafeteria one day by myself. And Lovie Smith was our secondary coach. And he came, sat down in front of me. Yeah, the head coach of the Chicago Bears. He came and sat down in front of me and introduced himself to me and started asking me questions. Great human being.
Yeah.
And so I said to him, so how long have you been here? And he told me, and I said, I bet you love this place. And he was like, yeah, it's good. And I said, do you see yourself staying here for a long time or something like that? And he's like, man, I'd leave tomorrow if somebody offered me a job. And I got pissed, EJ. And I don't know if he could see it on my face, but here I was, my eyes, I was starstruck by this place. And Pat Summitt, the great women's coach, was there, and I got pissed. And it took me weeks and weeks to get over it. This guy, we ain't even started the season, because I took the job in August. And we hadn't even started the season yet. And this guy is already telling me he'd leave in a heartbeat. But then as I grew older, and he actually left after the season. I was like, glad he's gone. But, traitor. But, Lovie Smith had a plan.
Yeah.
And the University of Tennessee was only part of his plan. His goal was to be a head coach of an NFL franchise. And he did that and was successful at it. But I didn't know at the time. I was young and naive, and I thought I'd, reached the pinnacle of my career. And then within 2 years, I was like, I can't wait to get out of this place because I want to be a head strength coach. And
Right.
I knew that I wasn't going to be the head strength coach at the University of Tennessee because, of who the man was ahead of me, and he deserved it. So I left. Social media is huge. It's a big influence in our industry, man. To some, it's a big influence. And there's a lot of good stuff out there, and there's a lot of bad stuff. How do you see it personally? And can, in fact, our conversation is a good segue into this. How do you see it? And can a person use it to their advantage, or how could it be bad? What's your opinion?
Me personally, I think it's what you put into it. I think if you have, some people, everyone's gonna, at the end of the day, everyone's gonna kind of judge what you do, period. You could, but in today's world, it's like we said when we talked about comparison, like everyone's kind of looking at what other people have or don't have. And the danger of social media is, people are only sharing most of the time their successes or the glory moments or things that make their lives sometimes look better than what they are. And that's fine. They show the highlights, and some people are real and show like even their low lights. It can be used as a way of community or testimony or ways of connection and networking. So I think it really is, what you make of it. Like if you're a person that doesn't use it, that's all the power to you. Like in all honesty, it probably would eliminate some distraction. But I know for someone like myself in this field, like I mean, I can't tell you how many, colleagues and friends in the field, and even friends out, like reconnecting with people you haven't met and like, or you haven't seen in a long time, and like, how powerful that can be, when used in a authentically genuine way. And in some stuff you put out, like, might be just showing that you're a human being, like I can tell you a true story, like in recent. So recently, me and my wife went to Disney World for our 5th year anniversary, and the players crazy, right? The kids at Tulsa, again, because I'm fairly new, a lot of them don't realize I'm the age that I am, and a lot of them are like, they didn't know I'm married. One, because she's not here, she's not around, but like they're like, "You're married?" Like, and I'm like, "Yeah, man, for 5 years." They're like, 5 years? They're like, "Dude, how old are you?" And like they'll start tripping out, and I'm like, you tell them your age. I'm like, yeah, I'm married, and so they just start like it blows their mind like that. You've been married for, and then you're the age, but it's a connecting point. Like for me, I love shoes. I'm a sneakerhead, and so. I always joke with the guys, like, none of y'all got a rotation better than me. Like, but it's a way to connect with those kids. And they're like, okay, you actually are, I would hope like
you're a normal person.
Yeah. Like I can talk to, like, I'm more than just this coach. Like, that's just part of who I am. So like family, my faith, things that I decide to put and promote and share is another way that I can sit there and like, we can start a conversation. Like I read a lot of books. I try to read a book once a month, as well as like the devotional I have. And one of the kids came up and was like, "What devotional book do you have?" So like, that's a connection point.
Cool.
So yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, man.
Well, thanks for doing this today. I appreciate your time and your effort.
Appreciate you having me, Coach.
Yeah, it's a blast to catch up, and that's the good thing about this profession. The bad part about it is the nomadic life that, you end up having. I had no idea when I left Tennessee in 1988 that I would only go back, for a bit. I've lived in Louisiana for 30 years. So, but it's a super great profession, man. And just like all the influences that we have with young men and young women, and all the different people that we get to meet and all the different, places that we get to go see. It's truly remarkable. And I'm super proud of you and your body of work. So again, I appreciate it. Please tell Tamara and your parents that I said hello, man. I still remember your parents, man. And they were so proud of you too, man. And you put the picture of your mom and on social media, on Instagram or something. Y'all were by the levee, I guess. And
we were right in front of Ops. We were right in front of
were
Ops.
you? Okay. Yeah, that's right. You were right in front of Ops, and Tiger Stadium was behind you, man. So that's super cool.
Yes, sir.
So please tell your parents I said hello. You can follow Coach Hibbler on Twitter and Instagram at Coach EJ Hibb. That's Coach EJ HIBB. For more information about the Moffitt Method program and everything that we have to offer, please visit our website, themoffittmethod.fit, or email us at info@themoffittmethod.fit. I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did today. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you again next week.